It was just around the end of December. The weather was becoming colder day by day. The sidewalks were covered in snow. Everyone clutched onto their coats and jackets, shivering as they walked down the street. One cold evening, a businessman walked out of his office. He was done for the day and was heading home. He locked the door and walked down the sidewalk. As he walked, he noticed a young boy sitting at the curb. The boy was dressed in a pair of faded shorts and ripped shirt, rubbing his arms trying to stay warm. As the businessman walked up to cross the road, the young boy jumped closer to him and shouted, "Mister, give me a penny." The businessman was annoyed. He shrugged and crossed the road. "Leave me alone." His car was parked a few steps ahead. He took a glance back to see the boy and hurried to get into his car and soon drove off. The businessman had worked hard to carve out a successful career for himself. It was tough in the beginning, but now he was well-to-do and had absolutely no worries for the future. He had loads of money stored in the bank. He had a couple cars in his garage and a huge, cozy house where his wife was waiting for him. Despite all the wealth and success, he never spent any money in charity for someone in need unless it was somehow in his benefit. He'd say, people need to learn how to work hard. He wasn't going to give around money so that people could find an excuse to be lazy. The businessman was soon home. He pulled into his driveway. He was taken aback when he realized the young boy he left earlier was standing on his front porch. The boy repeated, "Mister, give me a penny." The businessman was enraged. "Get off my property or I'll call the police." He pushed the boy aside and entered his house, closing the door shut. He freshened up and sat cozy in the living room while his wife brought him his dinner. As he ate his food while watching TV, he noticed the young boy was still outside on his porch. He was staring at him through the window. The boy was turning blue from the cold, holding tight to his body in the freezing weather. The man was so irritated. "Where do these beggars come from?" He sighed and got up to pull the curtains. The next morning, he had totally forgotten about the little boy that was following him yesterday. Every now and then, he would have to shoo off some homeless man. It wasn't a big deal for him anymore, although it made him worried to leave his wife home alone. He thought of securing the locks on his house and maybe installing some cameras and a security alarm system. Whilst arranging all these thoughts in his head, he opened the door. He found the boy was still sitting there. "Mister, give me a penny." This time, the man ignored him. He double-checked his lock and headed to work. As he started his car, the wheels spun in the snow, covering the boy in icy, muddy sleet. The businessman had a busy day. He was awfully tired by the time he reached home. But when he got home, instead of being relieved, he became even more annoyed. He found the boy waiting for him at his porch. Angrily, he got out of his car and fumbled through his pocket. He took out a copper coin and threw it at the boy. "Here's your damn penny. Now get out of my sight," he yelled. Without a word, the boy searched the snow for his penny, picked it up, and left. The next day after work, the man thought he would see the boy again. He was afraid the boy would be after him begging for money all the time now. Giving that penny was probably a mistake. He walked out of his office. Luckily, the boy wasn't there. He hurried into his car to head home. He had his fingers crossed. As he turned around the curb to his driveway, the boy wasn't there either. He felt relieved. He entered his house, and as usual, his wife brought him his dinner in the living room and sat next to him. Every time the man would lift his spoon, he'd get a strange feeling that someone was watching him. He kept looking up at the window, but no one was there. His wife asked him if something was wrong. When he told her about the boy that had been following him, she laughed. "I've never seen you behave like this because of a beggar. Come on, you have bigger things to worry about." She reminded him of all the wealth he had, how successful he had become, and nothing could harm him. That night, when the man was sleeping, he thought he felt a little cold hand touch his shoulder under the blanket. He heard a voice, a faint breath near his ear. "Mister, give me a penny." The man jumped out of bed with a scream. He ran to turn on the lights, but no one was there. His wife tried to calm him down and convince him he was only dreaming. The man went back to bed, but he was unable to sleep. He tossed and turned from side to side when he remembered something. something that happened many years ago when he was in school. He and his friends were the cool guys at school. They used to give hard time to others. He remembered a boy belonged to a poor family. He would wear the same pair of old clothes to school, the same faded sweater every single day. He and his friends would burst out laughing every time they saw the boy walk down the hall with his worn-out shoes. He got out of bed and went up to the attic. He dug out the box of his old school yearbooks and looked through each and every page for that boy. As he looked through the pages, his memories floated in front of him as if he were reliving those years, when the others used to think twice before talking to him and his friends. He remembered all their faces, and finally he spotted him, that poor boy. He realized the boy that had been following him, the boy that stood out on his porch in the freezing cold, was that very same boy from his school days. The man tried to remember the last time he had seen the boy. That day, the boy had come to school wearing a brand new sweater. It was after years that he was able to afford something new. When it was time for lunch, he and his friends made fun of the poor boy and swirled jokes at him. He laughed at the boy. "What are you doing in this cafeteria? Haven't you spent everything on that sweater? Your pockets are empty. Now your family won't be able to put dinner on the table tonight because of that brand new sweater of yours. So sad." Hearing what he said, everyone in the cafeteria began to laugh out loud. Back then, he and his friends had just assumed that the boy's parents had transferred him to a different school and had moved to another town. They couldn't afford to send their son to the same school as them. But that day, as he stood in the attic staring at the boy's picture, he realized what he had done. The man was terrified. He couldn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, his wife served him breakfast, but he had lost his appetite. He didn't eat a single bite. He wore his coat and slowly opened the front door. He saw the little boy waiting for him on his porch. The man was having difficulty breathing. His heart rate was increasing. The little boy stared at him, quiet. The man fell down to his knees. He grabbed the boy's feet and begged for his forgiveness. "It was a long time ago. We were young. We were kids. It wasn't my fault. What do you want from me?" The boy just stood there staring at the man. The man pulled out his wallet. Shaking, he pulled out a wad of bills and gave it to the boy. "Here, it's all yours. This is all the money I have in my wallet." Without a word, the boy took the money from the man, trembling, and left. That evening, the man was feeling much better. His conscience was clear. He regained his appetite and had his dinner. While he had his dinner, his wife sat next to him. He told him that one of his friend's wife had called today and informed her that her husband had passed away that morning. The man was shocked to his core. It was his childhood friend. It was one of the friends that would be with him all the time. That friend of his was his age, and the last time they had met, he was quite healthy. He asked his wife if she knew anything about how he passed away. She told him that she didn't know when the family had asked them to come to the funeral the next day. The next day, the man and his wife stood amongst his friend's family members, all shooken up by the tragic loss. His friend's wife came to him and wept. "Before he left us, he wrote a new will. He gave all his property, his possessions, his wealth, his house, to charity. He passed away so suddenly. He suffered a severe heart attack. I found him laying on his office floor. He was still holding the pen in his hand. He left nothing for his own family. How will I take care of everyone like this?" The man tried to console the woman and told her to call him if she ever needed help. The man couldn't understand why his friend would suddenly change his will, and he didn't recall his friend having heart disease either. As far as he knew, his friend agreed with him when it came to giving money out in charity. He never even saw his friend sparing a nickel to drop into a homeless man's coffee cup. The man was awfully stressed. He couldn't make sense of his friend's end. Thinking of all the possible explanations, he drifted off. In the middle of the night, he woke up feeling thirsty, so he went down to the kitchen to have a glass of water. He rubbed his eyes as he walked down the stairs and stopped. In the light of the moon, he could make out a small dark figure in the kitchen. As he stood by the doorway, the figure stopped and stood still. A voice whispered in the darkness, "Give me a penny." And then it clicked to him. That friend of his that had passed away was from the group of boys that used to make fun of that poor boy with him. Had he also seen the same boy after all these years? Was this the reason behind the sudden heart attack? The man pulled his hair. He couldn't take it anymore. He was panic-stricken. His blood was running cold. He grabbed his coat and his keys and ran out the door. He drove to the nearest bank and took out all his savings. He sold his house, his furniture. He even sold his wife's jewelry. He put all the money, the gold, the silver, the jewels into a bag, every penny of it, and waited. He waited for the little boy. The man went out that morning. He walked the streets. He went to the office. He stood by the curb waiting for the boy. Later that day, the boy stepped out of an alleyway as the man was walking home. He said, "Mister, give me a penny." The man ran into his house and dragged out the bag. "Here, this is every penny I have. Take it, and leave me alone." Without a word, the little boy picked up the bag and left. Things became very difficult for the man financially, but he was relieved for having amended the wrong he did in the past. He was content in his heart, although he was now living on the street. He had a few coins in his pocket, and he didn't know if he would be able to have dinner that night. That night, he found an alleyway empty. Someone had thrown away a blanket. He wrapped himself in the dirty blanket. It wasn't enough, but that was all he had now. He laid on the ground, still shivering. It was pretty late. Everyone was at home. Only a few cars drove by. It was quiet enough for him to sleep. Suddenly, he heard some footsteps in the alleyway. Out of the darkness came out the little boy. The man sat and looked up at him. He cried, "I gave you everything. Everything I had. I have nothing more to give you. What do you want from me?" The boy chuckled and said, "No, mister, that's not all." 25 years ago, that day, he and a group of his friends had dragged the boy down to the local river. It was in the middle of winter. Snow covered the whole town, and the lake was partly frozen. He and his friends pushed the boy around and threw the boy's backpack out on the frozen lake. Incidentally, the boy tripped and nearly fell into the icy cold, freezing water. The boy tried to get up out of the mud, but he kept slipping. He tore his new sweater that had been soiled in the dirt, and he had no hopes of getting his backpack out of the icy waters. The group of friends laughed at the helpless boy. They didn't give a second thought to the poor boy and left him on the lake alone, cold and wet in the chilly weather. The next day, the boy didn't turn up in school, but after all these years, he finally got his revenge.